Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. My guest this evening is Arnie, old friend of mine who's been on the show a number of times in the past, and I get kind of missing him, so I have him come back on again. And the title of this evening's show is Martin Luther King Jr. An Activist Way. And we've got a pretty good show lined up for you. And even though a lot of you have seen me talk to Arnie before about who he is personally, we're going to talk about it again because there'll be some new viewers watching this show because it's on all over the world. Arnie, you ready for that?
Wow.
How you feeling?
Fine. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You betcha. Thank you for coming. You betcha. So let's start off with, as you know, the show goes in two parts. The bio section, which is the first half or so, we'll talk to Ernie about who he is and his history and like that. And the second half of the show, we'll talk about what the title of the show is about, Martin Luther King Jr. and his activist way of being on this earth. So let's start off, Ernie, by talking about who you are personally. You ready for that?
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. And I always have a trick question or two.
That's good.
You want to have a trick question for starters, or shall we surprise you?
Well, at your service.
Okay, I'm going to surprise you because you're waiting for it right now.
Okay.
And your full name is?
Arnold Panich.
No middle name?
No middle name.
How come?
I don't know. My parents never gave me one. I have a nickname.
What is it?
Arnie.
Okay.
My mother called me Arnold.
Yeah.
With a little bit of a European accent. That's my name, Arnold Panich.
Okay, I like it. And you were born when?
I was born May 24, 1941 in Detroit, Michigan.
In Detroit.
Yeah.
Why were you born?
Boy, that's a good question.
That's the
I'm not sure.
Question.
But I'm here.
You're not sure why you were born?
Well, I know the biology of why I was born.
No, I'm not interested in that.
My parents wanted a family. I'm the eldest of two children. And they wanted a family, and I appeared.
Okay. And who was the other children?
I have a brother named Fillmore Panich.
And where is he?
And he's in Washington, D.C.
What's he do?
He's a businessman, a private businessman. He's an advertising guy. And lived in Washington forever within the shadow of the U.S. Capitol.
Ooh.
Right downtown. Yep.
Is he as good looking as you?
Oh, no. A lot prettier. A lot prettier.
Is there anything significant about your racial, national, or cultural heritage that would be of interest to the viewers and to me?
Yeah, sure. I happen to be Jewish. And so I am a cultural minority in this country. Although we are 6 million Jews in the United States, approximately almost half of the world's Jewish population.
Really?
But it's important in the story of Tikkun Olam, which is that Jews are taught to be charitable, give back, social change, help the poor, is part of our religious heritage. And so that probably explains why some of us have done things to help other people, change things, don't like the arrangements and so forth. But we're a minority, and that it's important. I think that it's part of my identity. We happen to live in a neighborhood of Detroit that had no Jews. So we were the only family on the block, which makes it even more unique because we had two religions in my neighborhood, Catholics and Publics.
Publics? What the heck are Publics?
Those are the ones that go to public school.
He does this to me all the time.
And the Catholics went to Catholic school. So those were the two religions, Catholics and publics. But we were a minority in that, largely Christian neighborhood.
How'd they treat you growing up?
Pretty good, pretty good. There was some racial slurs here and there, some anti-Semitic things that you put up with, but we got along all right.
All right, all right. Do you have a religious preference today?
I'm kind of non-practicing. I'm unaffiliated, is what we call it in Judaism. And I've found some substitutions in my social sphere. I don't call it a religion, but I am a humanist. And so I spend some time in that group.
What is a humanist?
One who abides by humanistic values of using science to solve problems, social justice, being concerned about other people, I think, something like that.
Yeah, I'm a humanist too, did you know?
That's what I hear.
Yeah, I'm also a humanist minister. I do the same things that persons of the cloth of other faiths do. I marry people and plant them and other sorts of things like that that persons do. And your education.
I mentioned public school. I went to public schools in Detroit, kindergarten through 12th grade, graduated from a technical high school in the printing department of Cass Technical High School.
Printing?
Printing. My father's a printer also. And then I went on to public universities in Michigan, and I got all the way up to a master's degree in social work. And then I've had further education. I spent a year postgraduate work. I've been part of that time in Oxford, England, Oxford University.
Oh, wonderful.
And the University of Illinois and Ohio State University. So I've had some postgraduate experience as well as my degrees at Wayne State University in Detroit.
Social issues. Why did you get concerned or that interested in social issues that you studied those kinds of things?
You know, you look at the world and sometimes it's half empty and half full.
Yeah.
I looked at the world and I saw some things I didn't like. I didn't like certain things I saw personally, and so I joined groups that would change those certain things. And so it's in my lifetime in Detroit and in college that I wanted to change things. When you see something that's wrong, I guess in my heritage and in my background, you say, well, maybe we can work in a constructive way to change things. Just some simple examples. At Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo in 1959, you could not live with a man of color in your dorm room.
In 59?
In 1959.
In Michigan?
In the northern country. In the northern country.
Yeah.
You would
A northern state.
have to fill out a dormitory card to say what race you were. The choices were W, N, or O. White, Negro, or Oriental. At 18 years old, I put C on my card. They didn't know what that was. It was Caucasian. And I had no dorm roommate until they looked at me. Once I was there, without a dorm roommate, they found a white person to live with me. In a dormitory of 400 men, or I don't know what the number was, a big dormitory.
Sure.
There were black rooms and there were white rooms, salt and peppered into the general dorm population.
In 1959.
In 1959.
Wow.
And one of my friends who happens to live in Portland wanted a black roommate and had to go through all kinds of hoops and finally got a Ugandan to live with, Abdul Hamid Masagazi. from,
And you remember.
yeah, he was from Kampala, Uganda. I remember that. And my friend and I talk about how difficult it is in 1959 to live with someone of another race.
And another country, another culture.
Exactly. So that's one example. Another example is students on my university campus. Western Michigan is a state university. If I dated a girl of another race, or if she dated a man of another race, each child's parents would have a letter saying, did you know that your child is dating a person of another race?
You're kidding. I didn't know that.
And went to their home in 1959.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you can imagine I was interested in everybody.
Of course.
See? And I may look white, but my father's immigration papers say that we're Hebrew. Race, Hebrew. So by definition, if I had dated a Presbyterian, I may have gotten caught. A Catholic, I would have gotten caught. But certainly if I dated a black woman, there would be a letter on the desk of my parents right now by the Dean of Men and the Dean of Women. So when we talk about life experiences at a tender age, you start to begin to wonder whether or not things need to change. Now let's go back to this Cass Tech. This is a city of 2 million people, where you take an exam to go to a curriculum in a technical high school from all over the city. So I grow up in a 5,000 student high school, a United Nations of a building.
Whoa.
Of everybody. Not my own neighborhood, but everybody who lives in a 2 million city, plucked away, taken and put in a high school downtown. Not my neighborhood high school, that's where my brother went,
Yeah.
but a multi-racial, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-economic level high school. And I go to Kalamazoo, to a state university, and I have that kind of orientation. Well,
Okay.
all right. So you do something about things like that. And we went to the Dean of Men. We, I say, an interracial group. We had an interreligious council of good people of all kinds of faiths and backgrounds. And we went to the Dean of Men and Dean of Women and said, what is your perception of socializing on a campus? And what is your policy about putting students so segregated in a dormitory? And those changes occurred in 1959 because of what we did.
You affected a change.
In those two areas.
You've been a troublemaker early on in your life.
Well, I saw things I didn't like, and I did something about it.
Good
That
for
was
you.
that was the college experience. In Detroit, oh my goodness. Black postal carriers, the postman,
Yeah.
black man, can't deliver mail in a white neighborhood in 1963.
That's unbelievable. I didn't know it was that bad.
A black man cannot deliver mail in a white neighborhood. Therefore, if there's a small number of black neighborhoods, and why have the segregation anyway, that means that there's a prescription on how many black letter carriers there can be, right?
Yes.
So you have a number of young aspirants pass all the tests, but there's no black neighborhood he can work in, so he doesn't get a job.
I didn't know those things you're saying to me now. This is in the records, in the history books?
Yes. I'll give you another example. This is now when I'm in graduate school. I'm back in Detroit. My confidence has changed after 4 years of being at the university for an undergraduate degree, and I know you can affect change. I'll give you another little peach.
Sure.
In the Michigan State Unemployment Office, a big building, Michigan State Unemployment Office, where thousands of people are coming for their unemployment checks or to get jobs or what have you. They had in the lobby of this building and in other buildings where the state operated, they had stores like you would have in a lobby of a building. Mm-hmm. Coffee shop, barber shop, restaurant, candy shop. The barber shop in this particular building on Woodward and the West Grand Boulevard had a barber who would not cut everybody's hair that worked in the building. If you were black, he would not cut your hair. In 1963.
Unbelievable.
In the state building, they had a private barber with a little cubicle, you know. He wouldn't cut everybody's hair. And his idea was, I will tell them I don't know how to cut the hair of other people. Now, I don't know to what level darkness he would cut, but I know that he would not cut African Americans' hair. Mm-hmm. I didn't like that. And that was brought to my attention, and those of us in Congress of Racial Equality in Detroit.
CORE.
Mm-hmm. Headed by James Farmer. And we made a change. I was in the barber chair making a change. And this is called the sandwich technique. It's real simple. You send in a white person, which was a colleague, mm-hmm. to get his hair cut. Mm-hmm. And then I walked in. He's in the barber chair. While I'm waiting for the barber chair, a black man walks in. Mm-hmm. And he says, I don't cut your hair. And the black man is one of our friends.
Yes.
And he says, why? And he starts to make a testimony with two other colleagues in the room. And so the black man leaves and he goes to a cafe nearby, waits for us. My friend leaves, and man, this man he's got a straight razor. And then the first man leaves and he goes to the cafe around the corner, talk to the black man, and both of them are writing the complaint. And I'm in the chair. Mm-hmm. At which time the barber starts to be vociferous about what do these people think they can do to think that I would cut their hair, and what rights do they have to tell me how to work? And I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble someday because of it, and blah, 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 blah. And while he's got a straight razor cutting my hair and trimming my, And then, of course, I'm pretty neutral to him. And, of course, I'm looking around. We get his name, his license number, his union badge is sitting up there. He's in the barber's union. They let him get away with this. And then we went to the cafe and we filed on him. And he changed his ways. Now, the change is interesting. We had also issues with restaurants in Detroit mm-hmm. that wouldn't serve African Americans. Seems to me that if you are a gentle person and you come in and you've got money to buy food, you ought to be able to sit down and eat, and you're hungry. Mm-hmm. Didn't happen that way. They would have a sign up that says, we refuse to serve anyone. We have a right to refuse to serve anybody. Mm-hmm. And that was a way in the window of saying, black people, you might as well just walk by because you're not going to get served. Uh-huh. So we had issues with those kind of folks. In the case of some of them, they have some strange responses. The barber retired.
Rather than cut a black person's hair.
Retired. The restaurant gave the restaurant to his son after we trashed the restaurant, one of many. We said we were nonviolent, but we got angry sometime. And we made it possible that he wouldn't serve anybody.
So you damaged his property.
And then he put the butcher paper in the windows, and he went fishing, and it opens up a month later with his son integrated.
You are sneaky.
In the matter of the U.S. Post Office, you put a picket up at the U.S. Post Office, they get very embarrassed. Huge embarrassment. Their problem is the black postman is going to do something to the housewives of the neighborhood while the husband is working. This is the proposition. The husband is going to not feel comfortable with the black man delivering the mail.
So this was core doing these activities.
These activities.
Uh-huh.
With the U.S. Post Office, it's a matter of getting to the supervisors and getting to the administration, because there's nothing in the postal regulations that would say you would
That's federal.
you would be discriminating against workers like this.
Yeah.
But it was a matter of, is it de jure segregation like in the South, or is it de facto, in fact,
Yes.
occurring? Certainly the barber, he signed an oath that said, I'll cut anybody's hair with money and in a need, right? I will cut anybody's hair. That's in the regs. But de facto, that's another story.
Wow.
So then that changes my. I'll talk later about Martin Luther King.
Sure.
And what he found out, and the things that he found out was things that didn't occur in Detroit. For example, everybody can vote in Detroit. Everybody can't vote in Mississippi. Martin Luther King found that.
Sure.
Everybody gets on the front of the bus in Detroit, and in Montgomery, Alabama, not everybody gets on the front of the bus.
Right.
You pay in the front of the bus, get back off the bus, and go in the back door in Montgomery, Alabama.
Get pay and then go out of the bus, go in the back door.
Right. And then fill it up back with black people and fill it up front with white people. And when they get too many white people and there's black people too far up, the black people stand in the back.
Yeah.
And the white people get seated down the route. Now, that didn't happen in Detroit. I rode buses when I was 5 years old and streetcars. And we never saw anything like that. People just got on the bus like they do today in Portland. So he saw some things like that, voting. He also saw that when a family wants to eat at a restaurant on the road, on a U.S. public federal highway, they go to the restaurant, they have a drive-in window in the back. The family gets out of the car and they stand there and they get takeaway food. The white people walk in with the tablecloths and the silverware and bathrooms and the same food throughout the South. Now, I should tell you, you live in Louisiana.
New Orleans.
Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about. So his...
Not to the extent that you're talking about it now. I'm still learning at this late stage of my life
Well,
the details of what was going
so
on
that's
up
called
north.
public accommodations.
Yes.
And it's really interesting how even with public accommodations, I heard in Portland, Oregon recently, black people are a little bit hesitant to go to public restrooms on the interstate highway because they say, we get killed in places like that. That there's de facto and de jure, and there's self-segregation sometimes. I heard that from a number of people at some talks I've gone to in Portland even.
Nowadays.
Today.
Oh my gosh.
And that's pretty illuminating to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Dr. King found all manners of segregation, top to bottom: employment, transportation, the Greyhound buses, local transportation, racial segregation in housing, segregation in employment, segregation in hotels and motels. You pull up to a motel like you would as a normal human being. It's before Holiday Inns now. You got a ma and pa hotel on a state road or federal highway, and they say, we're full. And if he can spot you in the parking lot, he pushes the full sign before you even get to the door. Right? Or apartment renting. Again, sandwich technique. Apartments are advertising, come on down, we have an apartment for rent. And you get there, and the apartment was rented yesterday. You go to another building. Come on down, we have apartments for rent. You get there, We just rented it this morning. Sandwich technique. You go with your bride, you present yourself. Is this apartment, any apartments? Yes, we have one available. We have actually 4 of them available. Show them the apartments. Go home, write it up. Here comes the black man with his bride. We rented all the apartments. He goes home, he writes it all up. Here comes another white couple. Do you have any apartments? Same day. Any apartments? Sure, we got 4 of them. They show them the apartments, and they say, we'll come back later, and they write it up. And that goes to a government agency that would put that guy out of business. Those laws were not in place before Martin Luther King.
Okay. Now, I want to respond to one thing you said just a minute or two ago, and then we'll take a break and come back the second half of the show. Barbers and getting a haircut. In New Orleans, when I grew up, there were 3 cultures. There was the whites and the Negroes. But the Negroes had 2 societies too. There were the Creoles and the colored. And we were taught that the Creoles are different. They're not colored. They're something different, something else. They're like a third culture, which they were in reality. But the point I'm making is how they were treated and how we were treated. Well, they had their own businesses and social clubs and like that. Well, I had a Creole barber, of course. And when I moved to California, there was a Creole community in the LA area. I had a Creole barber again. But then somewhere along the way, I lost my barber, and I didn't have a barber. And even all these years have gone by now, and I'm 86 this year. And just about a year and a half ago, I finally got the nerve to go to the barber shop near my house in Beaverton, because I was afraid to go there, even though things are all different now, especially up here. But inside of me, it was scary for me to go in and ask this guy to cut my hair because I have white people's hair. But the fact I look brown or black said, you know, but anyway, it's hard to even talk about. But I finally went in and asked about getting a haircut, and he says, oh, sure, fine. But my point I'm making is all these years I was still nervous and anxious about going in to get a haircut. And for many, many years, my wife cut my hair because I was afraid to go. I didn't grow up in a black community, even though I am part black or black. So it was hard for me to go find a black barber. It felt I was strange doing that. There's my own prejudice, you see. But how lasting an impression that can make on someone's internal workings and their emotions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
So you self-segregate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who wants to be rejected for a haircut?
Yeah.
So you go across town to somewhere, and if you don't feel comfortable with going across town, because in fact maybe those people were African American and you were Creole,
Mm-hmm.
you have your wife do it.
Yeah. And she's of German extraction, so I was integrated anyhow. But anyhow, let's take a break, Creole Arnie, and then we'll come back and talk some more.
Okay.
Mr. E, can we take a break now, please? Well, okay, looks like we're back. And thanks for staying tuned for those of you who are watching. And for those of you who tuned in late, thanks for tuning in, even though you were goofing around as we were in the first half of the show. And for those who missed the opening, Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching right now is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and whatever it is we've decided to talk about. And I'm sure you guys are all as interesting as my guest tonight, Arnie Panich. And the title of the show is Martin Luther King Jr. An Activist Way. So let's resume where we left off, and Arnie, take over and tell us more about the title of the show and what you want to say.
So we have Martin Luther King Jr., who is a young minister, and he has an assignment in Montgomery, Alabama, the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
And he's involved with various kinds of human rights groups and so forth. The NAACP is there, and there's other activist groups. And there's a woman named Rosa Parks.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, I'm not going to take it anymore, and that story is pretty well recorded. And so she doesn't move away from the black seats. She sits in the white seats in Montgomery, Alabama. And the date is 1955. December 1st, 1955, she said, I was tired. I'm a seamstress. I just want to sit down. And she went to jail. And so some people had to decide what to do with this lady, Rosa Parks. Gordon Parks is out trying to get money to get her out of jail,
Mm-hmm.
her husband,
Uh-huh.
a barber, by the way. And she's a seamstress downtown. And they got her out of jail, and the group of people got together at NAACP and some kind of a Montgomery Improvement League.
Uh-huh.
And they decided to stop this practice of having black people going in the back door of the bus, sitting in the back, being humiliated. And it took a year. The Montgomery bus boycott took until 1956, and it ended on December 20, 1956. 1 year
A year boycotting.
of boycotting the buses when only white people were riding the bus. And it's interesting that it was many Jews that actually provided cars to carry these people to work and back, to carry them to shopping, to take them to church on Sunday. White people of good character and support took those black people so that they would not have to go on the bus. So there were some sympathetic people that didn't agree with the policy, but it took a year. Well, this was successful, and it turned into a much bigger, much bigger than Montgomery, Alabama. It turned into interstate commerce. It turned into all the bus companies. It turned into Public Accommodations Act with Lyndon B. Johnson. Martin Luther King standing there watching Lyndon B. Johnson sign Public Accommodations Act, Civil Rights Act of 1965.
Saying segregation was over in public transportation.
In public transportation. In fact, it was earlier for public transportation. Martin Luther King. Now, it is amazing to me that in 1955 he was in India. And Martin Luther King went to see Mahatma Gandhi.
Gandhi, yes.
Well, I should say he went to see, I'm not sure when Gandhi died, but I'm pretty sure Gandhi was still there. I'm not sure. But he went to Gandhi's room in a house. Mahatma Gandhi, by the way, his name is Mohandas K. Gandhi.
Yeah.
But Mahatma Gandhi means soul of Gandhi, soul of India.
Mm-hmm.
And he had rooms in rich people's houses all over India. And he had a nice front room in this building in Mumbai. And he could stand on his porch, open the window, and talk to 10,000 people that were there at all times for him to make a speech and a sighting of Mahatma Gandhi. Now Mahatma Gandhi's gone. Martin Luther King is there in 1955, and he goes into that room, and he said, I'd like to be inspired a little bit. And 5 days later, just taking the minimal food and drink, he came out and said, I'm ready to go back and have a revolution in the United States of my people. 1955. And sure enough, that same year you had the Montgomery bus boycott.
5 days.
5 days.
He stayed in that room.
Well, I was in that room. I've been in that room.
Wow.
On a friendship tour, a delegation of good people that went to India. And I was in that room, and I can see how he felt and how he wanted to stay and get the aura of this wonderful, nonviolent, social change man who got the Empire of England to quit India.
Capitulate, yeah.
Quit India with all those people and all that wealth they were exporting. So King knew about Gandhi. King knew what he did, and King wanted to have that inspiration. So he comes back and he decides to work with Rosa Parks and the group in Montgomery, and much to the chagrin of his own congregation, who were, the status quo was fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see what was going on then. We had school segregation. We had public accommodations, which I mentioned earlier, hotels, motels, restaurants. I didn't mention theaters. Black people had to sit in the balcony if they were allowed to go to the theater at all.
At all, yes.
There were separate entrances in the bus station with separate toilets and drinking fountains. And I saw that bus station in Montgomery. They made it into a museum in Montgomery. The Greyhound is moved, but the old Greyhound bus station is still there, and they've got colored and they've got white entrances at the bus station.
They're still preserved where you can see how it was.
And they're showing that to everybody, too. There is now what I call civil rights tourism.
I got to mention here, you've been to 75 countries on this globe.
Yes, I have. Voting rights. What could be more elementary in a democracy than allowing everybody to vote? No, not in the South. There you had poll taxes and you had literacy tests. Okay? I have never been asked to recite the Constitution word for word. But if you were a black man or woman in the South, Mississippi, South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana, Florida, Arkansas, Alabama, Texas, you had to know the Constitution verbatim. You had to pay a poll tax without any regard to the rights of citizenship. Kids go to school, they learn all about citizenship, and then when you get to be of age, you can't vote. So he found all these things present, and he said, enough is enough.
Yes.
We want to do something else. Let's talk about the March Selma to Montgomery.
Yeah.
1965 in March. They decided, the group in Selma got together, black and white together.
Do about 4 or 5 minutes on that, because then we want to leave some time for you to do.
Okay. They marched from Selma to Montgomery. Well, they got to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and the state police decided that's as far as you can go. I spent a day in Selma. I saw the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I saw the monument beneath the Edmund Pettus Bridge to the civil rights workers. I was in their museum underneath the next door to the bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And we saw it on television what happened when they pushed the people back.
And Donia killed Congressman from Georgia.
John Lewis.
John Lewis, yeah.
Was in that group. He was a leader. He got beat up.
Bad.
Friday night, he's going to be here.
He's going to be in Portland?
He's going to be in Portland at Temple Beth Israel at 6 o'clock as part of Martin Luther King's celebration. Now, I don't know when this program is going to be aired, but I tell you, he's going to be here. And he's known well. He went from activist, young man with Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to a U.S. congressman from Georgia.
Yes.
So they marched again a week later, and they were successful in walking from Selma to Montgomery. In the middle of that route of 50 miles, in the middle, there's a big U.S. government museum about that march. And they have so many road signs, it takes you forever to go along, because they have these safe farms where people could camp overnight on the march, because you can only walk so far.
Yeah.
And they would have these safe farm sites with signs up. And I should tell you that part of that march was the sad story of Viola Liuzzo,
Yes.
who was driving her 1960 Oldsmobile with black people in it, this Italian-American lady, with Michigan license plates in her 1960 Oldsmobile.
Mm-hmm.
She was driving back from Montgomery with these black people, and up pulled a car next to them, and they shot away the KKK.
Yeah.
They shot away. There's a huge monument and sign in the exact spot where that happened, too.
Wow.
And what that meant to their family. I knew Viola. She was at Wayne State University with me.
Really?
And we were in actions together. Some of us went to the South. Sweeney, Goodman, and Cheney, other good people from the North went to the South.
Yeah.
And they got beat up. Another example is the Freedom Riders, led by James Farmer and Congress of Racial Equality. They went from Washington to New Orleans in a bus, in a Greyhound bus. And they refused to move. They started out integrated in Washington, D.C., sitting wherever they wanted to. And when they got to a certain point, the Greyhound company said, you must segregate. With the same ticket, with the same rights in Washington, D.C., but not the same rights going south. Their buses were firebombed, like the one in Anniston, Alabama, where the bus was firebombed. That bus, by the way, now is in the National Civil Rights Museum in the Lorraine Motel.
I want us to go on some more, but time is getting short. And what's the purpose of your telling the viewers all these stories right now? Why are you doing that?
Well, we have to do something about segregation and discrimination.
That's still going on today.
All the time.
Dog whistle politics.
Discrimination is in the mind. Segregation is an action. Discrimination. So we have to deal with training people about how to treat other people. It's in the mind.
Okay.
I'm better than you are. He's less than I am. I got more than he does. All this discrimination. Segregation is an action. And it's going on. It still goes on.
So you're going to do some of Martin Luther King's speeches. This from a Birmingham jail. Which speech is this you're going to read from?
I'm going to read you the I Have a Dream speech from the March on Washington, August 28, 1963. I'm going to read excerpts.
Please do. Let's start.
Dr. Martin Luther King. We're at the Lincoln Memorial, and we're in Washington, D.C. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 5 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree is a great beacon of light, of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still badly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the courts of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check.
Cash a check.
When the architects of the Republic wrote the magnificent words in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note that which every American was to fall heir.
Mm-hmm.
This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the millennial right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check in which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of injustice.
Mm-hmm.
We must forever conduct our struggle on a high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy that which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They've come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone, and as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with fatigue and travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from one smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their adulthood and robbed of their dignity by signs that say whites only. So I have a dream that one day in the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at a table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even in the state of Mississippi, the state sweltering in the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day in Alabama, with the vicious racist, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day there in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to become a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. And let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews, Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, great God Almighty, free at last.
Yes. How do you feel right now, Arnie?
Well, it's very stunning. I heard this speech in Detroit. He gave this speech after a march on Woodward Avenue about 3 weeks before. But I didn't go to Washington, D.C. There were busloads that went, but I didn't go. So this speech is important.
Of course. So things are better now in many ways, but in some ways they're not better enough.
Precisely. Absolutely. We still have lots of segregation in the North and in the South. Mm-hmm. We have all kinds of segregation. And some of it is affirmative action. In other words, we'll put some people ahead of other people for purposes of integration. Mm-hmm. And the University of Michigan got caught with that. Uh-huh. And it's a whole other story of reverse segregation. And then I have issues with that. For example, my high school is so elite that any student can go to the University of Michigan who's black. Because they know that that student has gotten a good education, has excelled, he's going to the University of Michigan. So that the University of Michigan, quote, can say, we've met the quota. They got in trouble for that. The Supreme Court said that's not the way it should be. So, but there's lots of segregation, of course. Like I told you, I can take you right now. You can go to an apartment building and get turned down, and I can go to an apartment building and not get turned down.
Even nowadays.
Of course.
Well, I'm aware the time is running down, but I want to allow a couple of minutes for you to speak to the viewers about what's happened here tonight and what you talked about and whatever else comes to mind for you right now.
I have been doing civil rights touring. If these issues are important to you, there are so many signs and monuments and plays and theater and museums dedicated to this situation. In fact, parenthetically, I have been on 4 Rosa Parks buses. There was one Rosa Parks in 1955 that got on one bus, but there were 600 buses in the parking lot. And these museums will grab a bus from someone's chicken coop and fix it up and put it in a museum and say, this is the bus. One of them is the Henry Ford Museum, a virulent racist, but yet it's in his museum. That's the official one. One of them is owned by an African-American lawyer in Rochester, New York. It's in his parking lot. That's the one. One of them is in the Rosa Parks Museum in Montgomery. That's the one. And the last one I've been on is in Memphis at the Lorraine Motel, now the National Civil Rights Museum. And each one claims, it's like, where did Lincoln sleep? Lincoln slept here. Every log cabin in the Midwest is full of Lincoln things. Rosa Parks is that big. Why? Well, this was a major thing she did.
Yes.
In Portland, Oregon, we have a Rosa Parks Boulevard, a Martin Luther King Boulevard, and a Cesar Chavez Boulevard. These people are not Oregonians. These movements, these people did America's work.
Okay.
So that's my thought.
So we need to continue doing America's work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Arnie.
Pleasure.
Creole Arnie, for coming on.
Thank you very much.
And we won't wait so long to have you back on again in the future.
Thank you very much.
I always enjoy whenever you're on.
Thank you very much.
And
I so appreciate you too.
PSA is, yes, there's our broadcast schedule for Washington County. Also, you can watch my shows on the web. Google Don Baham YouTube. There's hundreds of shows there, all sorts of interviews and musical talent and all sorts of other things. And the American Civil Liberties Union is so vital nowadays because our civil liberties are being diminished by the government in Washington, D.C. And we got to end corporate personhood. Corporations are not people. We've got to amend the Constitution to reverse the Citizens United decision a few years ago. And I want to tell you about what else we got to show you in public service announcements. Don Baham YouTube. Okay, you can learn more about the Alliance for Democracy. That's a local organization, international organization that works on political and social issues that are to the benefit of the populace rather than the super rich or the corporate rulers of our country. My friend David Doak, who has Populist Dialogues, go to that website and click on AFD videos and see some of his interviews that he's done through the years on political and social issues to do largely with what's going on in the Portland metro area. Oh, and I got to tell you about KFC in case you don't know. KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind. Be friendly and be charitable to you too, and you, Creole Arnie.